The dishwasher's been clicking every 11 seconds since she left. Click, click, click. It's not broken. I checked. Took the whole panel off and sat there with my hands inside it for 20 minutes like some kind of heart surgeon for Whirlpool appliances. Nothing's wrong. Still clicks. I don't know if it was always like that, or if I just didn't hear it before. Maybe she did, and that's why she used to play music during dinner. Or maybe I'm losing my mind now that the house is so quiet I can hear everything I was never supposed to notice. Like how the bedroom light buzzes when it's dimmed halfway. Like how the hallway creaks when you shift your weight just a little on the third tile. Like how someone once whispered, "He's pathetic," right outside our back door, and didn't realize I was sitting on the other side of it. Yeah, that happened. But I'll get to that. What matters is that Mira, my wife, I guess, didn't scream or throw anything when she left. She didn't cheat in the way you'd expect. No lipstick on a collar. No late-night texts from D. No suspicious business trips. She just filed. Like she was returning a blender that didn't work the way she thought it would. I got the papers in the mail before she even looked me in the eyes. We still lived in the same house for 5 days after that. Her on the left side of the bed, me on the edge of the right like some unwanted guest. We brushed teeth in silence. She hummed while folding laundry like it wasn't the end of the world. I cried once. In the shower. I made sure the water was loud. And then she was gone. Just like that. But what haunted me wasn't the silence or the cold way she left. It was what I heard 2 nights later from the backyard through the half-cracked bathroom window. A voice I recognized, hers, and another I didn't. And a sentence that hit so hard I dropped the toothbrush out of my hand. He'll never figure it out. He still thinks it's his fault. The toothbrush clattered on the floor, and suddenly, I wasn't wondering why she left. I was wondering what I had never known to begin with. I didn't sleep that night. I tried. I even got back into bed, turned on the fan like I always do, wrapped myself in the side of the comforter she used to hog, but my mind was chewing itself alive. That voice, that sentence, that tone. It was her voice, but I'd never heard her speak like that before. Sharp, almost amused, like she was playing a game where I was the only one who didn't know the rules. And the other voice, deeper, male, mumbled. I couldn't make it out clearly, but it wasn't unfamiliar. You know that weird feeling when someone's voice is stuck in your brain like a word you almost remember? That's what it felt like. It was someone I knew, I was sure of it. I just didn't know from where. The next morning, I did something I'm not proud of. I moved her potted plants. The ones on the back porch. She always kept 3 in a neat row, rosemary, mint, and some sad little succulent that never quite grew. But the night before, she'd stood behind them during that conversation. I remembered seeing her shadow through the blinds. So I shifted them. Just an inch or 2. Enough to tell if they were touched again. Then I waited. For 2 days, nothing happened. I lived in that stupid, echoing house like a character in a haunted movie. I made coffee and didn't drink it. I put toast in the toaster and forgot it until it burned. I Googled things like how to know if your wife lied to you for years and signs of emotional manipulation you missed. The plant stayed in place. Until the 3rd night. It was 11:38 p.m. I remember the time because I'd just paused a podcast where someone was talking about artificial empathy. Ironic, I know, and I walked into the kitchen for water. That's when I heard it. Faint voices again. From the backyard. I froze. This time, I didn't just listen. I tiptoed. I moved so slowly it felt like I was gliding. I crouched beneath the kitchen window and held my breath. The porch light was off. They didn't know I was awake. "He thinks I left because I was unhappy," she said, in that same smug, rehearsed tone. The guy laughed, low, short, nasal. I knew that laugh. "Worked out though," he said. "Now you don't have to pretend anymore." They both laughed this time. Like it was all one big inside joke I was too pathetic to understand. I should have stormed out. Screamed. Demanded answers. But I didn't. I sat there on the floor like a child hiding from monsters that already saw him. My heart wasn't racing. It was crumbling. And then the guy said something that made my skin crawl. "He'll find out eventually. Someone always talks." And Mira just said, "Not if I handle it first." Handle it how? Handle what? Who was this guy? I stayed up all night again, replaying that voice in my head. That laugh. That sentence. It wasn't just infidelity. It wasn't just emotional distance. There was something else here. Something planned. And that's when it hit me, the laugh. That dry little snort. It wasn't a stranger. It was Brian. My coworker. The guy who used to come over to our house for game nights. The guy who helped me move our sofa last spring. The guy who always said Mira was out of his league. Now I wasn't just heartbroken. I was terrified. Because Mira didn't just want out of our marriage. She wanted to make sure I never found out why. I didn't go into work the next morning. I couldn't. I just sat on the edge of the bed, our bed, staring at the floor like it might explain something to me. The shadows under the dresser, the dust collecting along the baseboard, the sock I hadn't noticed before, twisted like it had been stepped on and forgotten. I used to vacuum under there. I used to care about things like that. Now it all just looked like a crime scene where the only victim was whatever was left of me. I thought about texting Brian. Something like, I know, or was it worth it? Or even just a dot. But I didn't. He'd deny it. Or worse, laugh. And Mira would probably spin some story that made me look insane, dramatic, jealous. The guy who couldn't let go. That's what people say, right? When a man feels something deeply. He's obsessive. He's unstable. He's the problem. So I did what any spineless, miserable man would do. I stewed in it. Quietly. Bitterly. Alone. But life, it turns out, doesn't wait for you to figure out your next move. Sometimes it just slaps you across the face in the break room. Because 3 days later, I got a call from HR. Brian had filed a complaint against me. I didn't believe it at first. The email just said I was being called in for a confidential discussion regarding interpersonal conduct and professional boundaries. I almost laughed. Me? I hadn't even spoken to Brian since Mira left. I hadn't done anything. But when I walked into that office and saw the expression on the HR manager's face, tight, polite, clinical, I felt my stomach drop. Apparently, Brian claimed I'd been creating an atmosphere of intimidation, that I frequently hovered, made invasive comments, and had made him feel unsafe. I sat there in that cold room, blinking like an idiot, wondering if I'd slipped into someone else's life. Unsafe? I hadn't even spoken to the man. I'd barely looked at him. But now here I was, defending myself against a fictional version of me he'd built like a fortress, and HR was listening. They said it wasn't a formal warning, just a note on record. But I knew what it really was, insurance. In case I ever said something. In case I ever made a scene. In case I dared to blow up their little secret. I walked out of that office shaking. Not angry. Not yet. Just unglued. I didn't go back to my desk. I drove straight home. Sat in the car with the engine running, gripping the wheel like it was the only thing holding me to earth. I wasn't imagining it. They were coordinating, planning, building a story around me, layer by layer, like drywall over a rotting frame. And then something truly strange happened. When I finally walked into the house, through the front door, still clutching my work badge like a fool, I noticed something was off. The photo on the hallway wall was crooked. That sounds ridiculous, I know. But it had always hung straight. I remember adjusting it last time I dusted. I stepped closer. The corner had a fingerprint smudge. Fresh. Someone had been in the house. I checked everything. Doors locked. Windows sealed. Nothing missing. Nothing obviously out of place. Except a faint scent of her perfume upstairs. Vanilla and orange blossom. Faint, but there. She hadn't lived there for weeks. Why did it still smell fresh? I went into the closet. Half her shoes were missing. I opened the drawer where I used to keep her letters. Gone. I checked the spare key under the back porch. Also gone. She'd been here. While I was at work. Quietly. Calmly. Like she still owned the place. And the worst part? She'd taken the letter I wrote her. The one I never sent. The one where I said I forgave her. I didn't even know she knew it existed. That night, I stopped being scared. I started getting angry. And anger, real, honest, ugly anger, has a way of waking a man up. There's a kind of numbness that settles in when you stop hoping for closure. When the person you trusted most twists the knife, not out of rage or betrayal, but out of indifference. I wasn't even worth a confrontation. I was just a loose end that needed to be snipped quietly. But when I realized she'd been in the house, something inside me cracked open. I didn't sleep that night either. I lay awake on the couch, eyes fixed on the ceiling fan. It clicked on every third rotation, another sound I'd never noticed before. The whole house was full of noises I'd tuned out for years. But now, everything sounded like a clue. At around 3:12 a.m., I sat up and made a list. I'm not proud of that, by the way. I wish I could say I stormed into justice, or ripped some truth from the jaws of darkness. But no, I made a spreadsheet. Things she took, things she left, things that made no sense. That last column filled up fast. Half the framed photos? Gone. Her mother's scarf she used to claim she hated? Gone. But the wedding album? Still there. My old journal, the one she used to joke about reading behind my back? Gone. The framed print she gave me for our anniversary. Love means never having to wonder. Still on the wall, crooked. I knew what I had to do. I had to find out what she was covering up, not just who. Because if she went through the trouble of deleting a private letter, gaslighting me at work through Brian, and sneaking into my house without a trace, then this wasn't just a breakup. It was a cleanup operation. So I went to the garage, and I pulled out the one thing I swore I'd never use again, the backup phone. It was a crusty old Android I hadn't powered on in 4 years. The kind you keep in a drawer because you might need it someday, but know deep down you never will. Except now, I did. Because once upon a time, Mira and I used that phone to record everything. House projects, conversations with landlords, audio memos of grocery lists. Her idea, of course. Smart couples document, she used to say. That way no one forgets the truth. I charged it for an hour, pacing like a man waiting for a bomb to detonate. When it finally booted up, I held my breath. No password. Mira had hated passwords. There were 37 recordings. The most recent one was dated 6 weeks ago. After she left, I didn't press play immediately. I just stared at the file name. Insurance_plan. M4A. My throat went dry. When I finally hit play, her voice came through the speaker like a ghost whispering into my ear. Calm. Measured. A little smug. If you're listening to this, it means you finally found the phone. I knew you would, eventually. You're too nosy not to. There was a pause. I heard her exhale, like she was taking a long sip of something expensive. I need you to understand something. I never hated you, but I couldn't live the life you wanted. You're small. You live in circles. You replay things. You apologize for existing. I tried to love that. I did. But Brian offered something else. Something simple. Clean. Another pause. And if this all comes out the wrong way, if you try to make a mess or play victim, just remember, I left first. The rest was just necessary. And you? Well, you were never really going to stop me. Click. That was it. Not a confession. Not a warning. A farewell. Polished. Practiced. Like she'd known I'd find it, and had rehearsed every word. I sat there for 20 minutes, phone clutched in both hands, the screen long since gone black. My ears were ringing. My heart wasn't even beating fast. It had just stopped bothering. And in that stillness, I realized something terrifying. That wasn't a goodbye. It was a threat. I didn't eat for almost 2 days after I heard that recording. Not out of drama. Not as some self-imposed punishment. I just forgot how. Food felt ridiculous. The idea of chewing, of digesting, of processing anything seemed too complicated for the state I was in. I lived on black coffee and adrenaline, pacing my house like a caged animal, waiting for something, anything, to snap back into place. But nothing did. I played the audio file over and over, searching for something, background noise, a whispered name, a reflection in her tone, but it was airtight. Too airtight. Mira always planned her exits like they were stage productions. Every word had been rehearsed. Every pause designed for maximum cruelty. But she'd made one mistake. She mentioned Brian. She never said his name directly, but that line, Brian offered something else. Something simple. It was enough. And I realized something then. She had underestimated me. Both of them had. They thought I'd fall apart, spiral, maybe cry into a microphone or write sad little notes to myself until I gave up. And to be honest, I almost did. But there's a moment when pain burns off and turns into something colder. Something heavier. It doesn't scream. It calculates. So I got in my car. I drove to Brian's apartment complex. Not the one he used to live in when we were work friends. The new one he'd casually mentioned during a Zoom call a few months back, when Mira and I were still pretending we were fine. Got a view of the water, he'd said with that smug chuckle of his. You and Mira should come see it sometime. I didn't buzz. I didn't go to his door. I parked across the street and waited. It took 2 hours, but eventually I saw him. He came out carrying gym clothes, earbuds in, oblivious. He looked exactly the same, average, normal. The kind of guy you'd forget 5 minutes after meeting. That's what made him dangerous. People like Brian slide under your radar. They don't set off alarms. They just move quietly behind you until you realize they've rearranged your whole life without permission. He drove off. I waited 10 minutes, crossed the street, and walked around to the back of the building. It was one of those trendy modern places, glass balconies, digital keypads, lots of fake greenery, and minimalist lighting. But here's the thing about minimalist design. It forgets people are messy. And Brian was messier than he looked. His patio door was cracked open, barely, but enough. A cleaning crew had left the sliding glass slightly ajar after hosing off the outside, probably thinking no one would notice. I shouldn't have gone in. I know that. But logic had left me weeks ago. I was powered by instinct now, raw and unfiltered. I didn't take anything. I didn't even walk fully inside. I just leaned in far enough to see. And that's when I found it. Not hidden. Not locked away. Just sitting on his dining table like it was nothing. A printed document. Open. Highlighted. Legal guardianship paperwork. I blinked, leaning closer. At the top, temporary guardianship request. Minor, Caleb J. Rains. My vision blurred for a second. I wasn't sure what I was looking at. I scanned it again. Caleb? Mira, and I don't have a kid. Brian never mentioned a kid. So why was my wife's signature, her full name, Mira E. Rains, on a line marked maternal guardian? And then it hit me. Not all betrayals are romantic. Some go deeper. Some rewrite everything you thought was true about your life, your relationships, your marriage. I didn't know who Caleb was, but I had a sick feeling that whatever answer I found next was going to ruin me in a whole new way. I don't remember driving home. I must have, obviously, because I woke up the next morning in my own bed, still wearing yesterday's shirt, the sleeves stiff with sweat. But I have no memory of turning the ignition, of backing out, of the stoplights or the turns. All I remember is that name. Caleb J. Rains. I repeated it in my head like a curse, like a word I didn't understand but couldn't stop saying. Caleb, Caleb, Caleb. It wasn't just the guardianship papers. It was the way her name, my wife's full legal name, was written so cleanly beside his. Maternal guardian. Like it had always been that way. Like she'd always been tied to this child I never knew existed. And the worst part? She'd signed it weeks ago, while we were still married. I spent the next day deep in records. Public searches. Reverse address lookups. I used tools I never thought I'd touch. Websites that let you see property transfers, family court filings, even old-school yearbooks scanned by bored internet archivists. I didn't care how low I had to crawl. I needed answers. And I found one. 10 years ago, Mira had a different last name. That part one knew. She'd told me it was her college name, something she dropped when she cut ties with her past. I never questioned it. I figured everyone had things they wanted to move on from. But what she never told me was that she had once been married. Briefly, at 19, to a man named Jacob Milner. The marriage was annulled in less than 6 months, no children listed, no assets, practically erased. But Jacob? He didn't disappear. In fact, he died 2 years later. Single car accident. No foul play. No drugs. Just wet roads and speed. And on the police report, in the next of kin section, was a note. No immediate family. Minor son placed in state care. Case referred to family services. Minor son. Caleb. I sat back in my chair, stomach in knots, heart pounding so hard it shook the mouse on my desk. Mira had a child before me. A whole child. A boy who was taken by the state after his father died. And she never told me. Not a word. Not even a slip-up. Not a hint of grief, guilt, or history. And now she was signing guardianship papers for him again, behind my back. What kind of person erases a child from her past? What kind of mother walks away and then circles back a decade later with a forged smile and a new boyfriend? Because that's what Brian was now, wasn't he? Not just an affair. Not just a rebound. He was part of something much larger, something I'd never been meant to understand. That night, I couldn't sit still. I paced the hallways like the house was shrinking. I pulled out photo albums. Looked at every picture of her I had, trying to spot it. The lie, the emptiness, the thing behind her eyes. But she always looked so present. So here. So with me. At 2:13 a.m., I got in the car. I drove to the only address connected to Caleb's name from the court documents. A small foster facility 30 miles out, tucked behind a strip mall and a row of abandoned motels. The kind of place that smells like bleach and old carpet. I didn't even know what I was going to say. I didn't know if he was still there, if he ever had been. But I needed to know. I walked in and asked for him. The woman at the front desk froze when I said the name. "Who are you?" she asked. And I, like the idiot I am, Said the first thing that came to mind. I think I might be his stepfather. She narrowed her eyes. He doesn't live here anymore, she said slowly. He was picked up last month. My mouth went dry. Picked up by who? She tapped her keyboard, looked at the screen, then looked back at me. But this time, her voice was colder. I'm sorry, sir. That information is confidential. I thanked her and left. But as I walked out, a boy's voice called out from behind a half-open door in the hallway. Is he here? The woman turned fast, slammed the door shut, and didn't look at me again. I sat in my car for nearly an hour after leaving that facility. I didn't drive. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, windows fogged, watching my own reflection flicker in the windshield like I was fading from my own life. That voice, that boy's voice, was too clear in my head. Is he here? He'd asked. Not confused. Not scared. Just expectant. As if he was waiting for someone. As if someone promised him I'd come. I replayed every conversation Mira and I ever had about children. About family. About the future. All those quiet nights on the couch when I brought up having kids and she'd smile and say, someday maybe. When it's right. Every time I believed that lie, she must have wanted to laugh in my face. She already had a child. A son she abandoned, rewrote, deleted from her history. And now, for reasons I still didn't fully understand, she was circling back. Not with love. Not with guilt. But with intent. Guardianship papers. Legal channels. And secrecy. Why now? Why bring him back into her life after all this time? And why cut me out of it completely? When I finally got home, the house felt smaller than ever. Cramped. Like the walls had shifted inward while I was gone. I locked the doors even though no one was around. Then I poured a drink I didn't touch and opened my laptop. There had to be something else, a thread I missed. And I found it, buried deep in a cached PDF on a family law blog I almost clicked away from. It was a case study, anonymized, but familiar. A story of a woman who relinquished custody of her child during a mental health crisis. No judgment, no punishment, just an agreement. The child was placed in care. Years later, she returned, this time with stabilized resources and a support partner. She regained custody. Support partner. It clicked. This wasn't just about Mira reuniting with Caleb. This was about qualifying to do it. She needed to show stability, emotional and financial. A long-term relationship. A clean domestic environment. Me. I was the prop in her application. The husband on paper. The quiet, cooperative man with no criminal record, no outbursts, no complications. A placeholder. A checkbox. A clean alibi. And once her paperwork cleared, once the judge signed off, she filed for divorce. Because I had served my purpose. And Brian? Brian wasn't the affair. He was the real plan. I was just the scaffolding she used to rebuild her image, until it was safe to tear me down and walk away. The rage that settled in me then wasn't hot. It didn't boil. It froze. It hardened in my chest like glass under pressure. I wasn't just betrayed, I was used. Recruited into a con I didn't even know I'd joined. But what terrified me the most was the boy, Caleb. He didn't sound bitter. He didn't sound angry. He sounded like a kid who'd been told a story. A version of events Mira must have crafted carefully, like everything else in her life. He probably thought I chose to leave, that I'd abandoned her, that she'd been the victim. And that twisted narrative was now shaping his world, his trust, his future. That's when I made my decision. I had to see him again. Not as a confrontation. Not even to expose her lies. Not yet. But because I needed to know. I needed to see his face. I needed to understand what kind of damage had been done, and maybe, just maybe, find out if there was still some version of the truth that could be salvaged from this wreckage. But fate doesn't wait for you to heal before it pulls the rug again. Because the very next day, a manila envelope appeared in my mailbox. No return address. Inside was a USB drive. And a note. Just 4 words. Still think she's harmless? I stared at that USB like it was ticking. I didn't plug it in right away. I left it on the kitchen counter for hours, circling it like a wild animal unsure if the food it found is poisoned. Every now and then, I'd glance over like it might vanish. Like it was a hallucination conjured by too much heartbreak and not enough sleep. But it didn't vanish. So, eventually, I plugged it in. 1 folder. Labeled, For You Only. Inside were 6 video files. No dates. Just numbers. 1 MP4. 2 MP4. And so on. I clicked on the first one. It was grainy. A phone recording, shaky and dimly lit. But I recognized the room. It was Brian's. That minimalist apartment with the concrete walls and fake art prints. And there she was, Mira, sitting on his couch, laughing. Not fake, public laughter, the real kind. The kind that makes your shoulders drop and your eyes crease. She looked alive, more than I'd seen in years. She took a drink from a glass, leaned over, and said something I'll never forget. It's almost done. Once the paper's clear, I'll drop the husband act. Brian, he doesn't suspect? Mira, he's too soft. He still thinks I'm confused, like this is a phase. But once the custody settles, poof, I'll let him feel useful a little longer. I felt sick. I skipped to the next video. More of the same. Conversations. Plans. Jokes. One of them even showed her reading from a script. Practice, probably, for what she'd say to the court. I watched all 6. I watched them until I couldn't feel my hands. And then I knew exactly what I had to do. But I didn't confront her. I didn't send the files to her boss or the judge or post them online in some pathetic act of revenge. I sent them to her. One email. One line. You lied to me. You lied to him. And now we're done. Then I sent a second email. This time, to Caleb's caseworker. I didn't attach the videos. I didn't make accusations. I simply asked for a meeting. Just me and him. 1 hour. No lawyers. No parents. And to my surprise, they agreed. The meeting was quiet. In a small room with fake plants and old tissues. Caleb was taller than I expected. Dark hair like hers, but serious eyes. The kind that didn't blink much. He looked at me like I was a test he'd already taken. I'm not here to fix anything, I said. I just want you to know something. You're not forgotten. You're not someone who gets erased when people change their name or write a news story. I didn't know about you. I should have. I'm sorry for that. But I see you now. He didn't speak at first. Just nodded. But right as the caseworker stepped in to end the session, he said something so soft I almost missed it. Thanks for showing up. 3 words. That's all. But they meant more than anything I'd heard in months. That night, I walked home lighter. Not healed. Not whole. But real. Mira would spin whatever story she wanted. Brian would stay hidden behind her. But me? I had the truth. And I wasn't going to carry it like a weapon anymore. I was going to carry it like a map. And for the first time in a long, long time, I wasn't afraid of where it would lead.